The Vexthar Council Chamber was a huge crystal structure that floated in space between galaxies. It had seen 10,000 years of politics between stars, but today the usual diplomatic arguments had stopped. All 73 representatives from the civilizations sat in shocked silence, their different kinds of eyes glued to the holographic display in the middle of the room. The star shaper was no longer visible. The first person to speak was Ambassador Zirin of the Kolvath Empire. Her forearm waved around in panic, and bioluminescent patterns flashed across her chitonious skin, showing how upset she was. This can't be done. 14 million years, the star shaper had worked perfectly. The architects built it themselves, and they were the first civilization to reach a high level. Impossible or not, it has failed, said Commander Oryx, a being of pure crystallized thought, living in a mechanical frame. His voice echoed through quantum channels, and there was a hint of panic in it. Sector 7's defensive perimeter is now completely open. We can't change the direction of solar winds or stabilize the binary system that protect our trade routes without the Star Shaper. The Star Shaper could be used as a weapon, but it wasn't just a weapon. It was a cosmic tool of unimaginable power that could even change the stars. It could speed up the fusion of stars, change the direction of solar flares, and even bring dying stars back to life. The ancient architects put it at the crossroads of the galaxy, and for millions of years it had kept the delicate balance that let civilization thrive in what would have been an unstable part of space. It was quiet now, dead, unmoving. Dr. Celix, the Thren Collective's head scientist, sent diagnostic data into the shared space. The Thren were a hive mind species, which means that billions of individual organisms made up their collective intelligence. They should have been able to figure out what was wrong. We've done 4,732 sets. Every reading show the same thing. The whole system has failed, but there is no physical damage, no energy signature showing an attack, and no signs of decay or sabotage. Then what made it happen? Zerine asked Celix. We don't know. And those three words sent a wave of fear through the council. The Thran didn't say, we don't know. Their combined processing power was greater than that of most computers on Earth. The smartest people in the galaxy had come to Star Shaper for 6 weeks. It hung in space like a sleeping god, a filthy kilometer long structure with symbols and patterns on its surface that seemed to change when looked at directly. Teams from all the major civilizations brought their best scientists and most advanced technology. The Kolbath brought quantum engineers who could change the odds of things happening. The Warminth sent their bioarchitects who could change matter just by thinking about it. The Machine Collective's artificial minds ran simulations in dimensions that human couldn't even see. Nothing worked. The Starshipper stayed dead, no matter what. Dr. Celix and Ambassador Zirin stood on the observation deck of the research ship, infinite, defeated. Something is so simple that our advanced knowledge is keeping us from seeing it. Zirin's antenna moved as they were thinking. Maybe we need to look at things from a different angle. Something not at advance. What do you mean? Yes, the architects were old, but they were also the first. There was once simplicity before all of our knowledge and technology, creation in its raw form. We might need someone who thinks like that. Celix's mind was full of interest. Are you saying that we should talk to a more primitive species? The Granth? The Vilnor? They're not even close to being able to travel in space. No, Serene said slowly, as her mind began to work on an idea. Someone even more basic is on my mind. Someone whose civilization still works with their hands and builds things from scratch instead of putting them together from quantum form. Someone who knows what matter is really, like because they work with it every day. You can't mean a person, Serene said firmly. I mean a person. When the council heard the suggestion, they immediately opposed it. In galactic society, people were not very welcome. They had only been able to travel faster than light for 3 generations, and they had only done so by accident because they didn't really understand the math behind it. Their technology was so old fashioned that it was funny. They still used engines that burned fuel on their home planet. They touched their tools with their hands. But when people are desperate, they make strange friends. And the council was desperate. Very well, Commander Oryx said. But this will be the last try. If a person can't fix it, we leave Sector 7 and leave the Star Shaper stay silent. We've already put it in so much time and money into solving the mystery. The message was sent to Earth through the right diplomatic channels, but it was coded in a way that made it seem less desperate. After all, the galactic powers were proud. They asked for something simple. Send your best technician, someone who works with material directly and knows how things are made without thinking about it. Earth's reaction came sooner than expected. They would send someone, not a scientist or engineer in the usual sense. They would send Jax Morrow, a welder from the New Detroit's industrial areas. Serene felt something she hadn't felt in decades when she read the file on Jack's Morrow, a mix of hope and deep doubt. By Earth standards, this person wasn't even a leader in his field. He was just really good at what he did. Very good. People knew him for being able to fix things that others said couldn't be fixed, and for understanding materials in a way that seemed almost natural. One of the council members said, he works in factory. When they saw Jack's profile, he fixes machine used in factories for a living. He hasn't had any formal education beyond basic technician training. Exactly, Serene said, her confidence growing. He doesn't think like we do. He doesn't know what we know, what we think we know, or what we don't know. He doesn't think about how things should be based on our theories. The order was made. They would take Jack's Morrow to the Star Shaper. A human welder's rough hands now held the fate of Sector 7, and maybe even the galaxy's understanding of architects themselves. The government agents found Jack's Morrow under a plasma conduit. He was on scaffolding 60 feet up in Bay 7 of the New Detroit Industrial Complex. The blue white light from his welding torch lit up his weathered face. Jax had spent half of his life in places like this, fixing things that kept civilization going without most people even noticing. He was 42 years old. Mr. Morrow, a voice from behind below said, we need to talk to you. It's important. Jax finished his grunt weld with steady hands and then raised his visor. Two people in expensive suits stood at the bottom of the scaffolding, looking uncomfortable in the heat of the factory. Types of government. He could always tell. Whatever it is, I didn't do it. Jax yelled down. His voice was rough, from years of yelling over machines. And if something is broken, fill out a work order like everyone does. Mr. Morrow, this isn't about what you did. It's about something we need you to do. For the earth. For the people. That caught his eye. Jax climbed down the scaffolding with ease, his boots ringing on the metal rungs. The agents looked even more out of the place up close. Their clean suits and perfect posture stood out against his greasy work clothes, and the smell of ozone and metal that was always around him. The woman said, I'm Agent Torres, And the man said, "This is Agent 10. We work in the Extraterrestrial Relations Division. We have a job offer for you that is a little strange. From other planet." Jax took a cloth out of his pocket and wiped his hand. "Look, I fix pipes and tanks that hold pressure. I don't know anything about aliens." "That's exactly why we want you," Jen said as he took out a tablet. There was something on the screen that made Jack's heart stop. It was a huge structure in space that was covered in patterns that looked like they were moving even in still image. "This is the Star Shaper. It's an old alien object that has been working for millions of years. It stopped 6 weeks ago. The most advanced civilization in the galaxies can't fix it. And you think I can?" Jax laughed. But when he saw how serious they were, it died in his throat. "You're not kidding," Torres said. "Mr. Morrow, we've looked over your record. You fixed things that three different engineering teams said could not be fixed. You once saved a whole processing plant from a huge disaster by welding a pressure seal that, according to the specs, shouldn't have held. But it did, for 5 years now, with no problems." "I just knew what the metal needed," Jack said with a shrug. "The specifications don't always take into account how materials really act when they're under stress." "Exactly," Chen said, his voice getting more excited. "You think in a different way. You use your hands and your instincts to get things done. You know more about materials than just the theory." "That's what they needed." Jax looked at the picture again, this time with more care. He felt drawn to the patterns on the artifact's surface, but he couldn't say why. They made him think of stress, fractures, how metal grain structures line up under pressure, and how flows and forces can be seen. He asked himself, "When do we leave?" 3 days later, Jax was on a ship speeding toward the Star Shaper. They had taught him the basics of alien antiquity and given him a translation implant that was supposed to let him understand and be understood by thousands of species. They also let him bring his tools, which had caused a lot of fighting. The Logitech's coordinator had said, "Mr. Morrow, the aliens have fabrication technology that can make any tool you need from quantum templates. Your welding tools are old fashioned by their standard. These tools know me, and I know them," Jack said with a lot of confidence. "They go where I go." So now his damaged tools were safely stored in the cargo hold. His torches, hammers, and other measuring tools, which had been used for years, were all worn smooth. To everyone else, they were trash. They were parts of Jack's in a way. The ship docked with the main research vessel that was orbiting the Star Shaper, and Jax got the first taste of life in the galaxy. The docking bay was huge and full of ships that were impossible of design and creatures that were impossible to imagine. A being entirely of geometric crystals used beams of colored lights to direct traffic. A jellyfish like thing that made of mirrors floated by. A group of creatures that looked like they were wearing their skeletons on the outside talked to each other in clicks and whistles. Then there was Jax, who was wearing an old work jumpsuit and carrying a toolbox that was probably older than some of the junior scientists on board. He met Ambassador Zirin on the observation deck. She was amazing, standing almost 8 feet tall, having 4 arms and having skin that glowed with stubble patterns. But Jax felt a little better because her 6 eyes were warm. "Welcome, Mr. Morrow," she said, and her voice came through his translator very clearly. "Hello, I'm Ambassador Zirin. It was me who suggested that you come here." He reached out his hand in the earth way of greeting and said, "Call me Jax." Zirin looked at it with interest and then carefully picked it up with one of her smaller arms. Her skin was warm and felt like fine leather. "What am I really looking at?" Zirin took him to the viewport. The Star Shaper was the most important thing to see, and seeing it in person made Jack's chest tighten with a mix of awe and fear. The surface was covered in what looked like circuit patterns, mixed with artistic designs. The materials seemed to absorb and reflect light in ways that were impossible. The architects made the star shaper, Sidon said. They were the first species to reach technological transcendence, and this is one of their best work. It can move stars around, control stellar events, and even bring dying suns back to life. But 6 weeks ago, it just stopped. No warning, no loss of structure at the subatomic level. We can't figure out why it failed, and nothing we've tried has fixed it. For a long time, Jax was quiet as he looked at the artifact. Then he asked, "What is it made of?" And Zirin's bioluminescent patrons pulsed with surprise. "Excuse me? The star shaper? What kind of materials went into making it? Not the physics of theory, not the energy signatures. What kind of metals, alloy, and other real things were used to make it?" Zirin's patrons blinked quickly, like a person who was confused. Uh, I don't know. Nobody has asked that. We were looking at this quantum architecture. It's dimensional resonance, and it's fancy science stuff, Jack said with a slight smile. Yes, I understand. But everything is made of something real. This old alien technology too. Someone had to build it before it could move stars around, make it, put it together one piece at a time. He looked at Zerin, and she felt a thrill go through her when she saw something in his eyes. Not fear, not pride. He was calm and sure of himself, like someone who knew what they were doing. "I need to get a closer look," Jack said. "Touch it with my hands. Touch the material. Then I might be able to do and tell you what's wrong." The shuttle that took Jax to the Star Shaper also took Dr. Steelix and three other senior scientists. It was clear that they were all very skeptical. As they got closer to the artifact, the Thren collectives thought were full of barely hidden condescension. "Ambassador Xenon has a lot of faith in your primitive methods," Felix said, putting extra weight on the word primitive. "But I have to admit that I don't see how a manual inspection will show us what our advanced sensors couldn't." Jax wasn't offended. He had worked with many engineers who thought doing physical work was beneath them. He said, "Sometimes fancy sensors tell you too much. You get so much information that you miss the simple things. How does the temperature change across the hull?" Felix was surprised by the question. "What's the temperature? It's all the same, about the same as the rest of this area of space, taking into account the radiation from stars. And when it was working?" No sound. Felix's group mind was filled with what might have been embarrassment. I We didn't check the temperature distribution in the operation. Thermal expansion can tell you a lot about where energy is going and where stress points are forming," Jack said. "Basic metallurgy. There should be thermal signals showing where the energy used to go if something this big suddenly stopped working." He saw that Celix's patron were changing to something deeper. They might have been starting to believe him. The shuttle docked at one of the Star Shaper's smaller ports. Jax put on an environmental ridge that the aliens said would keep him safe from the vacuum and radiation. The suit felt wrong and too stiff, but he got used to it. Jax felt it as soon as his boots touched the Star Shaper's surface. Not on the surface, but on the deep level. It was like touching a machine he'd worked on for years and knowing right away that something was wrong. He couldn't put his finger on it, but the metal under his feet felt dead in a way. He asked, "Can I take off a glove?" "Absolutely not," one of the scientists said. "The radiation alone would, just for a second. I need to touch the material directly." Serene gave the go ahead, even though it went against all rules and common sense. Jax took off his glove and put his bare hand on the star shaper's surface for exactly 3 seconds. Before putting it back on, he learned more in those 3 seconds that the scientist had in 6 weeks. "It's cold," he said. Not cold in terms of temperature. The stuff itself is cold. Gone. Not something that was running hot 6 weeks ago. Like metal that has been sitting around for decades. Selig said. That's not possible. Things don't just go cold like that. Energy slowly goes down according to the thermodynamic rules. I don't care about your rules, Jack said sharply. I'm telling you how I felt. This metal isn't just not powered, it has lost the ability to carry energy. Like the parts are there, but they've all been blocked off. He got down on his knees and ran his gloved fingers over the patterns on the surface. They looked nice, but now he could see they were more than that. They looked like the lines that form in well worked metal, like the grain structures in forged metal. These patterns had a story to tell. He pulled out a small handheld microscope from his kit and said, These aren't just designs. The scientists were fascinated by how he looked at the surface, with tools that were much simpler than what they thought. These are flow channels. Can you see how they connect? How do they split up and come back together? This is how energy flowed through the system. One of the Warminth scientists said, the quantum substrate analysis didn't show any such function because you were looking at the quantum level. I'm looking at the structure itself. It's like blood vessels in a body. You could study blood chemistry all day, but if you don't get that the vessel need to be flexible, that they need pressure, and that the heart needs to pump, you miss the point. Jax got up, his mind racing. I have to see the core, the part that made the power, the heart of this thing. To get to the core, they had to go through passages that hadn't been opened in 18 million years. The scientists had mapped every square centimeter, but were too scared to go inside because they were worried about contaminating the area or setting off an unknown defense mechanism. Jax wasn't scared of that. He was more afraid of not understanding that he was of danger. The hallways inside the Star Shaper were stunning. The walls had a faint glow of leftover energy that was just bright enough to see by. The patterns on the inside were even more complicated, moving and weaving together in ways that looked almost like they were alive. As Jax walked, he ran his hand along them to feel the different textures and the slight changes in temperature. He suddenly stopped the whole group and said, This was built by hand. Check out these seams. You might not think they're made the way they are. Someone physically made this, shaped this, and put it together. These are welds. Impossible, Selig said without thinking, then stopped. I mean, the architects were really ahead of their time. They wouldn't build things this way. Why not? Jax asked. Advanced doesn't mean hard. The old fashioned way is sometimes the best way to make something. Make it strong by hand making each connection and making sure every joint is perfect. That's how you make something that will last for millions of years. They got to the core chamber, and Jack's breath stopped. It was huge, with a diameter of at least 200 feet. It was held in the middle of the room by structures that looked like they had been grown rather than built. The patterns on the surface of the sphere were the same, but they came together here, all pointing to a single point at the sphere's equator. And that's when there was a crack. There wasn't a big crack, just a hairline fracture that was about 6 inches long. The scientists moved on with their tools, already making observations, taking measurements, and forming hypotheses. Jax just looked at it, and a smile slowly spread across his face. You found it? Zidane asked with a hope. Yes, I found it, Jack said. And it's worse and better than you think. Explain, Selig said. This crack didn't happen from the outside, from the inside. It's a stress fracture. The stuff is really old, right? It's 18 million years old. No matter how good the materials are. They will wear out over time because everything is so perfectly balanced. This hairline crack messed up the whole flow of energy. It's like having a heart attack because one of your arteries is blocked. But we can make a patch, one of the scientists said with excitement. We have molecular assemblers that can match any material at the atomic level. No, Jack said. You can't fix this. The gag goes deeper than you can see and follows the metal grain structure. You're only covering up the problem. If you patch the surface, the material itself needs to be reforged. Horror spread to the group of scientists. Reforge an architect item. That's that's a sin. It would destroy knowledge that is worth a lot. It's the only way, Jack said with conviction. These parts need to be cut out, heated to the right temperature for forming, repaired to fix the internal structure, and then put back together with the rest of the piece. It's like fixing a broken bone. You don't just put the surface back together with glue. You put it in the right place and let it heal from the inside out. And you think you can do this? Zillion asked in a low voice. Jack stared at the crack, the patterns that flowed around it, and the dead metal that had once carried unimaginable amount of power. He thought about all the repairs that had seemed impossible to him, all the times people had told him it couldn't be done, and all the times he had proved them wrong. Yes, he said, I can do this, but I need my tools. I need a place to work, and I need everyone to stop talking to me about quantum fields and dimensional resonance. This is metal work. This is what I do. The scientist yelled in protest, but Zillion raised hand to tell them to be quiet. Mr. Morrow Jacks has taught us more in 1 hour than we learned in 6 weeks. I believe him when he says he can fix it. Jack smiled and said, What do you need? Access to the core chamber, a workplace, my tools, and someone who can tell me how hot this material needs to be before it becomes soft. After that, all that's left to do is weld. They gave Jack 3 days to set up his office, and during that time, he became something of a celebrity among the research staff. Scientists who had laughed at his presence at first were drawn to watch him work because they were interested in techniques they thought were outdated but couldn't deny worked. The first problem was figuring out what material the star shaper was made of. Even though they didn't believe at first, Dr. Felix ended up being Jack's unlikely ally in this time. The Thren group liked how straightforward Jack was and how he was willing to ask stupid questions that got to the heart of the complicated problems. Felix said, The base material is an alloy we've tentatively called Architect 7. Their minds projected holographic molecular structures into the air. It's mostly made up of things we can see, but they're put together in ways that shouldn't be stable according to the normal physics. Jax looked at the projection and then waved it away. Give me a real sample, something I could touch, warm up, and test. The sample would be worth its weight in gold. It's broken, and the whole star shaper is priceless, Jack said. I need to know how this metal moves, how it reacts to heat, and how it wants to flow. Holograms can't do that. They brought him a small piece that had been cut out of a non-critical area with laser-like accuracy. Jax brought it to his temporary workshop, which was a cleared area in the cargo bay of research vessel, where he had set up his tools. The aliens had offered him access to their advanced fabrication technology, but he had turned it down. He brought his own forge, torches, and hammers instead. It looks like a museum, one young Colvat scientist whispered to another, as they watched from the observation galaxy that Jax had insisted he build. He learned early on that People did better work when they knew what he was doing, even if they didn't know why. Jack slowly and carefully heated the architect's seventh sample, paying attention to how the color changed and how the surface texture changed. He wrote down everything with simple tools like scales, pyrometers, and other basic measuring tools. The scientists who were watching were shocked to see data they had never thought about before: how the metal's weight changed with temperature, how its resonance changed, and how it reacted to being hit with a hammer. It sings, Jack said softly, as he tapped the heated sample with a small hammer. The sound was clear and pure, and the note seemed to last longer than it should have. Every metal has its own sound. This one, this one is in perfect pitch. He spent 2 days just learning the material, heating it up and cooling it down, bending it and straightening it, making test pieces to see how it acted when it was under stress. The scientists filled terabytes of data watching him work. They realized they were seeing a way of doing things that was thousands of years old, but contained truths that had somehow forgotten. Jack said he was ready to start the real repair on the third day. He had given instructions on how to prepare the core chamber. The cracked sphere had been carefully stabilized, and his tools had been brought inside. Jack stood in front of the crack with his custom torch in hand and took a deep breath. He told everyone to leave the chamber, except for the important monitors. I need to focus, because this is going to get hot. Along with Felix and a few other senior scientists, Ambassador Zerian stayed. They watched from a soft distance. As Jax approached his task with the seriousness of a surgeon getting ready for a life or death surgery. The first cut was the hardest. Jax had to take out the cracked part without hurting the other parts or changing the complex patterns of energy flow. He had spent hours in looking at those patterns, tracing them with his fingers and figuring out how they all fit together. He had to have faith in what he knew now. His torch lit up with a basic blue-white glow. The aliens had tried to give him a plasma cutter, an antimatter torch, and a dozen other high-tech tools. He had made his own, which had been changed over the years to respond to even the smallest change in his grip. He was as familiar with his tools as he was with his own hands.